most of my content, most of the time, has completely crap videography. And that's not because I don't understand how to make a beautiful shot, but usually because I don't care, because I don't think it's necessary for getting the idea across. Nevertheless, there is an artsy side of me that loves composition, and so that has compelled me to learn how to make nice shots when I want to. And here's a behind the scenes look at me trying to capture just that. I'm working on polymer clay right there at the workbench, and I'm trying to maximize the visual appeal of the shot. Far and away, it's mostly about the lighting. Lighting creates the mood. Every single color that's on the screen is considered when I switch into composition mode. You can't do it all the time. It becomes exhausting. And not just because it's mentally exhausting, it's also taxing physically and psychologically, because you're constantly moving stuff. Anyhow, the point of this video is to help you, in case you care. And in order to help you, I want to tell you that you might want to consider getting rid of your traditional tripod and swapping it out for something like this. If you're like me and you're doing a lot of showing your hands doing something, the over-the-shoulder sort of setup that you might use with a traditional tripod like this can become cumbersome when you're doing hands recording. And the reason for that is because think about where you're standing and where your tripod is. If it's here comfortably, then it's in the way of your elbow. But instead, when you use a boom like this, you can keep it completely out of the way. Now, this thing is way larger than I would like for it to be, but just consider this component here, which is, well, I would say that it is a modified chemistry ring stand, but there are no pieces left from what was once the ring stand. Here's the ring stand, and so all of the pieces have been completely swapped out on this, but that's where it started. Note that this kludge is a decade's worth of video making, so the finished product is pretty versatile, although it's unconventional. It's for a can light. This is what a typical setup might look like. I might be seated here. If I were working right there, the boom would be to my left side. And you can imagine that it stays well out of my way, leaving me 2 operational hands and lots of leg room. It's also pretty good for these sort of overhead shots. Another thing that I like about it is that, well, with a traditional tripod, there's a vertical line here that will usually cast a shadow from your lighting right to where you're trying to work. This, of course, still has a shadow, but the bulk of it is pretty far out of the way, usually. Another thing it does is you can do pan shots like these rotational shots using this. It's a bit of an art to do it, but it's definitely possible. Sorry, I was in the way. What we have at the base is a piece of particle board carpeted underneath, attached to a motor. But attached to its spindle is this replacement for the chemistry's ring stand's upright, and this bolt here adjusts its friction to slow down its spin. The heart of this gizmo is the center widget, which attaches, wait, I need two hands, which is made from high-density polyethylene and which connects two perpendicular axes together and allows them both to adjust. This yellow thing here, this is a metal weight that's inside of a piece of memory foam and attached with rubber bands. It dampens vibration and allows me to counterbalance. Here's a little piece of rubber so that I don't get poked. And on the other side, the camera adjusts along this. This is a ring stand part. It's a 3-finger clamp. I can't remember what it's called, but it allows me to remove the camera whenever I want, undock my footage, put it back in, and it gives me all sorts of strange angles and extremely versatile articulation. It's taken me years to become familiar with the ways in which it moves, but at this point I can get any angle I can imagine. The grip here on the fingers, it used to be those things that you use for pencil grips, but those wore out. This is just the vinyl jacket that's on electrical wiring. And I had to fix it with some epoxy and copper wiring because I wore it out. I'm due for a new one. This handle has some inner tube, bicycle inner tube. It's just a dowel rod and it has a 1/4-20 thread inside of it. And you look just like this. Yes, this camera that I use, I have multiples, and it's a 10-year-old $100 camera. As I've said, it's all about the composition and the lighting more than anything. Video resolution and quality, those things are secondary to me. But I might not be the best person to listen to because my channels are not exactly that popular. Moving down, you want your camera boom to lower all the way down and be able to get underneath your work table. If you can't get lower than your table, it's a pretty big limitation, especially if you're doing a lot of close-ups. And also, it's nice to be able to just remove this altogether, replace it with what is quite often called an apple box. This allows you to get different height, or just you could set this on the floor. It's all about versatility. Sandbags, all sorts of things, stabilize things, rest on. You never know what kind of silly setup you're going to have to create in order to get the shot that you want, and it's always temporary, so there's not much point in setting up something too elaborate. Duct tape, bubble gum, rubber bands, whatever you need to do. The dolly itself is larger than I would want it to be, but for the longest time I used a couple pieces of plywood with some casters underneath it, and its limitation was the extension cord. These pneumatic tires let it float right over irregularities all over the ground, which, to keep my feet from hurting on concrete, I have to have these cushy mats everywhere. So if you'll forgive me the indulgence, I'm not sure sometimes why I'm putting the energy into the things that I put the energy into. But I kind of do it for myself in a strange way. And so when I'm applying what I believe to be my art, I don't expect people to even notice it. But that's what makes us all strange and unique, isn't it? You kind of just have to swim in your own direction and allow yourself that luxury every once in a while. If you don't, you'll go crazy. Because ultimately, this is your game to play, and you can play it however you want. There aren't really rules. But if I were to summarize what I think after a decade of this silly practice has given me in terms of skill, if I were to ask to summarize what I've learned that's useful, towards getting the shot that you actually want. And by actually want, what I mean is when you want to be faithful to the recreation of that mental image that you have, you want to replicate that in your actual shot. I would say don't light things directly. When you do light things directly, think of it as like you're spray painting. You just give a little bit of a pulse of direct light to the thing. You never just hold the spray paint can right on it and go tss. That's amateur. Think of it as like airbrushing, just a little bit at a time. The rest is lighting from the sides, underneath, the background for depth, or the reduction of light from the background to, I don't know. I don't know how to explain an impromptu. I would have to write a script, and I'm not going to do that because remember what I said about it not being important enough? Feel free to start a conversation though. Okay, I'm going back to my project. I'll see you later.